In this video, I want to talk about an element that we've all heard of before. Ever since we were born, one of the first elements we got to know was oxygen. And our parents let us know that oxygen is extremely important for breathing. Element number 8 on the periodic table, oxygen. You have to know that oxygen is the most abundant element on Earth, but most of it is not gas form, but it's in Earth's crust and it's mixed with other elements forming oxides. A good example is titanium dioxide, one of the most common elements on Earth. You might say titanium is extremely expensive. What do you mean it's common? If you've seen our video about titanium, you'll know that titanium is extremely common, but it's extremely expensive to make it into pure form because you have to remove the oxygen atoms from it. And that's one of the many reasons that oxygen is the most common element in Earth's crust because it's mixed with many other elements. So oxygen is only available on Earth? No, it's the third most common element in the universe. Even though oxygen is common in the universe, but there's no air pressure, there's no atmosphere, therefore no one can breathe in space. But oxygen is very uncommon if you compare it to the first two common ones. The most common element is hydrogen, making up about 75% of the universe. It's also the most simple atom in the universe as well. After hydrogen, we have helium as the most common element, which makes up about 23% of the universe's atoms. So 98% is just these two elements? That is correct. 1% is oxygen, and the remaining 1% is other, which could be hundreds of different elements. All the stars in the universe are formed because of hydrogen and helium gases forming it. When a star is formed under extreme pressures and temperature, helium and hydrogen atoms turned into heavier elements. Elements like carbon, iron, gold, lead, and many other elements. But one of the elements that it does turn into is oxygen. Even though oxygen is not considered a heavy element, it's much heavier than hydrogen and helium. That's why when you have an atmosphere on Earth where oxygen is present and you take a balloon and fill it up with helium, that helium is automatically gonna go up because it's lighter than oxygen or just lighter than air. This could be possible with hydrogen too, but hydrogen is an extremely dangerous gas. If you've seen our video about Hindenburg, you'll know that they filled this giant airship with hydrogen to lift it up, and it ended all in a disaster, which is why they don't do it anymore. So since oxygen is 1% of the universe, why is it so common on Earth? And it's so common that we can literally breathe it in all the time. It allows plants to grow and it allows life to continue on. We first have to figure out how oxygen was formed on Earth. Billions of years ago, about 4 billion years to be exact, a lot of asteroids were hitting Earth. Asteroids that carried a little bit of water. When this continues on for millions of years, tens of millions of years, even hundreds of million years, it continues to add water to the planet. And that water slowly turned into seas and oceans. But we still do not have oxygen on Earth. Oxygen wasn't really brought to the planet, but it was made. As you know, water molecules have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, making H2O. So technically, you do have oxygen inside the water. That's why single-cell microorganisms started to form inside these hot waters. And when you have living things through photosynthesis, they slowly start to produce oxygen. Oxygen that leaves the water and starts going into the air. And when this continues for millions of years, you're slowly forming an atmosphere. These living things are the oldest living things that we are aware of, the oldest living things on planet Earth as well, and they are responsible for producing the first oxygen on our planet. Scientists believe this started about 3.7 billion years ago. So with photosynthesis, the microorganisms in the water use the sunlight, the water, and the carbon dioxide to produce energy and release oxygen in return. You might say that was quick. I like how fast these microorganisms produce the oxygen we need. But this was not quick at all. We just explained it quickly. This took hundreds of millions of years to form. The oxygen you and I breathe, or the animals that use it, don't breathe in one oxygen atom. They breathe in O2, which is 2 oxygen atoms. But there's also O3, which is 3 oxygen atoms connected to each other like a V, forming ozone. Yes, ozone, the same thing that creates that ultraviolet protecting layer in our atmosphere. And that's the reason there's a hint of blue in the atmosphere, because ozone gas creates a little blue color. If you've seen our video about why does fire only exist on Earth, you'll know that one of the main reasons is oxygen and air pressure. You might ask, what about the universe that has 1% gas? Why isn't there fire in space? First of all, space is a vacuum, there's no air pressure, and all the oxygen is not in one spot to help out, it's all scattered. But you might say, what about stars? They're literally giant fireballs. You have to know that stars aren't actually on fire. What you're seeing that's creating light and heat is nuclear fusion. And the thing that you're seeing that looks exactly like fire is actually called plasma. Plasma creates light and heat, but it's not the fire you and I know. In a way, you could say fire needs 2 sources of fuel. Something to burn like wood, and oxygen to help it keep burning. If one is not available, fire will not work. Every animal, every planet, every marine animal needs oxygen to live. Some don't notice, but marine animals, like different types of fish, need oxygen to live. Of course, their system of breathing is completely different from humans, but they still need the oxygen in the water. That's why when you do something and contaminate the water, you basically kill the oxygen in that area, like when you pump too much carbon dioxide. That causes all the marine life to die, technically because you kill the oxygen in that area. When you see polluted water with a bunch of dead fish, just know the first stage that killed those fish was the lack of oxygen in that water. Another thing that oxygen expedites is oxidizing different things, or just good old rusting. When metal rusts, because of oxygen and other elements, it's because it wants to put it back to its original form. But either way, oxygen is one of the most important elements for all of human life and every living thing. We suck in the oxygen from our lungs. The oxygen enters the blood, and the blood goes everywhere to give oxygen to all of our body parts, especially our brain. And this allows us to continue living. So how is oxygen kept stable on our planet? Just like back in the day where most of the oxygen came from the waters, nowadays most of the oxygen is also produced in the oceans and the seas of our planet. It's not the ocean that creates it itself, it's actually the living things in the ocean that creates the oxygen. After oceans and seas, the most common way of getting our oxygen is through forests and jungle. Even a tiny bush can give a whole lot of oxygen, all the way to an entire rainforest. Also, it's good to know the most forested area in the world is Siberia. That also helps us get a lot of oxygen. I think that pretty much wraps up our video about oxygen, element number 8. I would ask you how much you wanted to buy, but it's not like other elements where you can weigh it. So please comment, how many kilograms should I put in the capsule?